So, although it's not very nice, I will apologize. My colleague Luis Borck was not able to come, and he's the network specialist. So any network-related question that you may have in this presentation, you can ask to me, but then I will forward it to him. Later, reply. So for those of you that are not familiar with the Caribbean, this is the Caribbean Arc, which is located in the northern part of South America and the eastern part of Central America and the southern part of North America, of course. And in our particular case, we based our research in the island that is today shared by the Dominican Republic and the Republic of Haiti, and particularly on the north central part of this island. As perhaps you might know, this was the first island in the Caribbean that was properly landed by Columbus and his men back in 1492. And our research area is actually located in between the main and first forts and villas built by Columbus and his men during the invasion of the island and the future invasion of the Americas. So this island was formerly known by the indigenous population as Haytí. And back then, before 1492, the most conservative estimate is that the population was around 500,000 people. And then when Columbus arrived, he even before putting his first foot on land, he renamed the island as La Hispaniola. And then in a census done by the Spanish in 1514 says that the indigenous population was decimated to 26,000 people. Of course, those are all relative numbers, but this means that within the first quarter of a century, 25 years of invasion, more than 95% of the population was killed or died with diseases. So after more or less 6 years of research, we have at the point where we can begin reviewing certain hypotheses on the archaeology of the island and the history of this island in the Caribbean with actual archaeological data, and especially focus on the Spanish bias representations and descriptions. So for this presentation, I will focus on one example, which summarizes actually a larger debate, which is what is known as the 5 Cacicazgo map or the 5 chieftain map, done in 1731 by Pierre-François Sever-Charlevoix, a Jesuit priest, on the basis of early 16th century accounts such as Bartolomé Las Casas and Oviedo. And then he created a visual, a map, of course, representation of the indigenous spatial organization back at the late 15th century. And as you can see here, what he did was to pretty much put together all the information and create boundaries and political hierarchical territories. And each territory was connected with a cacique or a chief, that perhaps you read the names over here. And the thing was that this map has been used by later mid-20th century and late 20th century archaeologists to replicate and actually create the political hierarchy or the interpretations about political hierarchy on the island, as you can see on the later maps. We think the issue here is that there was an implicit continuation of ideas of territories and ethnicity based on the homogenization of the indigenous populations that eventually led to the contemporary construction of the official and extra-official indigenous past. So one of the colonial legacies of these historical processes of territorial and cultural creation is basically what you see here. So the indigenous population were homogenized to a single group, which were called the Taínos, and then the territorial separation in the island was left to this 5 Cacicazgo idea. Now, during the past 6 years, we have doing the research in the main research area that I showed you a little bit ago, pretty much focusing on doing opportunistic surveys that, as you perhaps might know, is basically visiting with community members from different towns on the region, areas where they have seen or they have knowledge of archaeological remains, and then combining that with our own expertise of the areas where we think there might be archaeological remains. And then we combine that with predictive models in order to prioritize areas to be visited and to research. And both methods has actually worked quite well and allow us to register around or over 300 archaeological sites in this region, where formerly there were around 12 or 13 archaeological sites registered before our research. So in these sites, or in some of these sites, we carry out large-scale excavations, as you can see here, or in a sample of them, also we did some test pit or small-scale excavations in order to understand stratigraphy, to have a better chronological registry. So, in this paper, we will confront, as I mentioned, this Spanish model of the indigenous territories before the arrival of Columbus, again, the archaeological data that we have been recovered, and of course, hopefully, this will lead to reevaluate the representation from a less biased perspective. And then, in this presentation, we are focusing on these three methods, among many others that we have done, and actually summarizing these three methods. So, first, social network analysis that, just very briefly and very generally, as you may know, is the process of investigating social structures through the use of networks and graph theory. And it characterizes network structures in terms of nodes, individual actors, people, etc., and ties, edges, or links that connect them. So in this particular map, and this part I will read because that's not my expertise, well, we are using networks created by the constructed ceramic typologies and creating landscape maps of ceramic attributes. So this image shows networks of ceramic attributes with the edges removed. And then all nodes, all the black points, are individual attribute values, and the red points, that are the red nodes, are attribute values at the sites. So this map demonstrates that there are a couple of different technological and learning traditions at these particular sites, which are in the site of El Carril and El Flaco. So from this, we can interpret that when stylistic variables are removed from this ceramic series, we get similar groupings of technological traditions between the two sites, which will allow us to compare connections in how people make choices about how to make particular pots. So the second method is point process models. Excuse me. I always have the impression I'm talking too fast, and then if I do my presentation in 10 minutes, then you will destroy me with questions. So, so 15 minutes or 16 is okay. So, as you probably know, a point process model is a method in probabilistic theory, and is devoted to analyzing the geometric structure of randomly distributed points in a space. So we use point process models particularly, and in this presentation, to analyze a very important feature in Caribbean archaeology, and these are anthropogenic mounds. Well, this nice sketch done by Tim Sonneman over there. The anthropogenic mounds have been interpreted traditionally, even from Columbus' first descriptions, as an element related to agricultural activities, and particularly with increase on production of agricultural activities, according to some of Columbus's and later chroniclers. And then archaeologically, this idea has been replicated and connected with the whole understanding of political hierarchization on this particular region. However, so far we haven't found concrete archaeological proof that first these mounds were used for agricultural activities beyond a small scale agriculture in the sense of kitchen gardens. And actually we have seen that the mounds are multifunctional. So we have mounds for garbage dumps, with funerary purposes, with settlement purposes, with land management on the site. And also very interestingly, when we calculate the amount of mounds, or when we observe on our database the amount of mounds on the whole archaeological dataset, we saw that most of them are located on the small size sites, which contradicts the traditional model that thought that the mounds were only present in the large site sizes, where archaeology thought that the cacique or the chief were actually lived in. Of course, if you see the proportions, then the largest percentage of mounds are located on the large size sites, but then again, because there is a less quantity of them. So then we, in terms of statistics, we are doing also some paleoenvironmental analysis on this mound. But before those results come, we wanted to see if there is a correlation between the distribution of archaeological sites with anthropogenic mounds and certain environmental variables that can speak about a relation with agricultural activities. So this is where the point process came into help. So this is an intensity surface built on the point process model. And as you can see here, this is the one that we did for the sites with anthropogenic mounds. And interestingly, the main environmental variables that the environmental variables that got a significant correlation with the distribution of sites with anthropogenic mounds were actually variables related to mountainous and intermountainous features. And in contrast, when we calculated the same point process model with the sites without anthropogenic mounds, actually we got significant correlations between the environmental variables related to agriculture, so good soils for agriculture, and these sites without mounds, which is actually quite interesting. Although, of course, this doesn't mean that the mounds were not used for agriculture, but it only means that there is something that we need to review within this type of data. So, in order also to test how much this point process model, or let's say that the correlation between the environmental variables and the site distribution is affecting the actual site distribution, we carry on some per correlation function. So here, what you can see is basically that for the sites with mounds, when we calculate what we call the null model, this is the site distribution, we have a high cluster on smaller distances that then goes to regularity as there is more distances between sites. But here you see that the first order trend, this is the point process model on the site distribution, has absolutely no influence or no effect, or is not influencing at all the site distribution. But on the opposite side, for the sites without anthropogenic mounds, there seems to be some sort of influence from the environmental variables to the actual regional site distribution. So the third method is a geographical weighted regression. So this analysis is based on the idea that social processes tend to be non-stationary, and therefore the forcing relationship between variables depend on the geographical place where the measures were taken. So the point process model is a model that we create on the basis of logistic regression, which is an analysis that calculates the global relationship between the dependent and independent variables. And then in order to specify this, we calculate the geographical weighted regression in order to see, yes, we know that there is a correlation between dependent and independent variables, but we don't know if there is a spatial influence on that particular correlation. So for this, we use this method, which is based on linear regression. And then when we calculated for all the overall database, we saw some differences in the space. That, only to give you an example with a couple of variables, we saw that, for example, the variable areas of hills and platforms, actually there is a group of archaeological sites that have the strongest relationship with this particular variable, and actually there are sites on the edges of this that have a weighted relationship. And for example, this with savanna soils and sandy and arid zones. So we took this and compared it with other statistical and spatial statistical variables that allow us to eventually create what we are calling two ecological zones on a particular area of this research region. So then the ecological zone number 8 is located on the northern part of this region, and is related with mountainous areas, small-scale agriculture, and endemic areas of the Utia and Hispaniola and Solenodon, which were the only mammals present back in 1492. These two. This is very nice. This is horrible to taste. Don't eat it. And then the second area is connected to flooding valleys related to large rivers and their watersheds, areas of resident salt pans, and endemic areas of the manatee. Don't eat the manatee because it's almost in extinction, so never eat it. And by the way, this is not a mermaid. This is a manatee. Probably you know that the mermaid ideas, yes, it comes from horny Spanish sailors. Sea manatees, but well, that's part of another story. Right? All right. So very large comments on this, summarizing our ideas. First of all, is the network of ceramic attributes suggested that there are different technological and learning traditions at the tested archaeological sites, even though in a standard archaeological basis, both look exactly the same. On the point process model analysis on the mound data allow us to observe local differences between the archaeological sites on the mountains and the ones on the floodplains, which suggests, we think, that these features do not seem to be directly related with the generation of food surpluses to sustain large populations within hierarchical polities or hierarchical groups, because polities is, as of course previously believed. And third, the relationships between archaeological sites and environmental variables are not given on the scale of the study area or the study region, but rather on particular sectors of it, which is something that we need to explore further. So this result has led us to believe that there is no doubt that the Spanish had a biased representation of the indigenous people, but archaeological patterns are actually confirming that they did point out some sort of general pattern, as you can see here when we are comparing the Charlevoix maps with ceramic distributions. However, the dynamic of local distribution may be suggesting that those global patterns could not simply be related to political territories, but rather with many other sociopolitical relations, such as commerce or inter-community exchange, as we can see with this particular example. And finally, the Spanish tried to make the indigenous landscape legible for their own nations' understanding and sensibilities by homogenizing a complex social and political organization into a 5-system map. So what we are thinking here, and in line of certain theoretical debates, is that borders cannot be seen as fixed materialities. Indigenous territories cannot be considered under contemporary assumptions, neither on the 16th century ones. But we really need to begin reconsidering how these differences, or these global and regional differences, actually are representing in terms of socio-political relations of the groups, also in a local scale. So to network analysis and spatial statistics, we are creating digital landscapes that can help deepen in the knowledge of the former diversity, although an actual change, of course, will only come when we dialogue between the our archaeological knowledge and the local communities, especially the educators in the region, which is part of another research if you want to talk about that. So thank you.